really something that's makes them feel special. And there is some problems with some cultures, of course. Muslims, they won't have anything to do with pork, and of course Hindus won't eat beef at all, so try maybe just to ascertain if there's anything in particular. And of course perhaps there's the option of people being only vegetarians. So these are just things to tuck in the back of your mind if you are inviting people home. So, go on. Yeah, some of the other opportunities for helping new arrivals has been helping them with accommodation, just giving them suggestions of where to look, or taking one girl to a student to the hospital, the medical service in the university. She obviously wouldn't have gone alone in her own culture, and so I took her along there.
With that accommodation, there was a boarding house that was sort of being illegally run. Well, the council closed it down. The students in there had already paid their rent, but the landlord who'd been closed down didn't return that. So we had a number of students who were out of no accommodation, and since they often live really hand to mouth, they don't have any spare money at all. But a church over in Canterbury took them in their hall, they had a shower, things, and they looked after them for some weeks until such time as other accommodation can be arranged. So that's another thing that can be done. Just when, if person who is actually, people who have encountered hardship, to actually help them out.
I was teaching English to an Iraqi refugee in her home, and she was pregnant, and so I took her and her husband over to St George to the hospital to go through all the processes, which was a bit daunting for her, of actually getting registered and all that sort of thing. So helping them with preparing maybe a resume for work. Tim's done that with one of our girls, just to give them that little leg up to be able to do it in a way that would be better.
Another thing that we've had fun doing is, organising a day trip out. We, particularly the students who have been here only a short time, they don't know, well, they know a little bit about Australia, but what they want to do is to actually see a bit more. So we've taken them down to the beach, and these two girls, they weren't ready for the water, but they sort of decided to paddle in it. And then a wave would come in, roll in behind them, because they'd be looking around the other way and not looking at what was happening. They'd get wet. That didn't worry them. They ended up being wet up to here, fully clothed. But and another girl, we took them over on the Manly ferry across to Manly, because it's a wonderful way of showing off Sydney, as in fact catching the Manly ferry. It's probably the cheapest tour you can get in Sydney and really see something. And it was one of those rougher days, and the spray was coming right up onto the top deck, and she came from a landlocked country, and she tasted this water that had gone, she says, "Oh, it's salty!" And just being able to enjoy their joys, and it gives us great pleasure too. So it's a lot of fun for us. We get great pleasure out of also being able to introduce them to things in our country, that we take for granted often. In fact, it works the other way. When we're in Kathmandu or in Nepal, you've got these spectacular 8,000 metre mountains. You know how we ooh and ah about these high snow-capped mountains. And frankly, the Nepalis look around and say, "What?" Because they're just there. So it works both ways. And then we take them to see animals, go down to Symbiose or out to koala things, pat a kangaroo and a koala, because we're the only country in the world that has them. Or out to the Blue Mountains, and be careful with that one, because they're not mountains.
The thing is that a lot of the new arrivals don't have a lot of money, and so they just live going from what they have to do from the railway station to their home to where they, go to school or university or where they work and things like this. So any of these little trips that we would take them on or guide them to go on are real adventures for them. So, and of course these day trips and things like that are a good way of having even deeper conversations with them and getting to know them even more. And our friend Alan Morant, who worked with these Muslims out west, he made up 7 favourite questions for Muslims, and these are his. I'll just read them to you because you may not read them. It was, what does it mean to be a Muslim, and what are the marks of a Muslim? Now, it's in Hinduism also. The more you talk about religion, they're very happy. It's not offensive at all. You can start talking about religion very quickly because it's not offensive to them. It's almost merit-making. And so another one might be, what is the message of the Quran or Islam? And what happens to you as a Muslim if you do not follow the teachings of the Quran? Why is Mary, the mother of Jesus, the only woman mentioned in the Quran? And what do you think Allah or God is like? How do you think you will be able to enter paradise? And I've heard that you celebrate the Feast of Sacrifice, in which you remember Abraham. What exactly does this feast mean to you? So these questions would really open up then opportunities to be able to share some part of the Bible story to our friends in a much more specific way.
But, as Alan was telling us last month, 35%, I think it was, wasn't it, in Hurstville from a Chinese background? 44. Okay. So, we thought we'd challenge you to sort of make up some questions for either a Chinese Buddhist or a Chinese atheist, or because those are the 2 predominant ones, weren't they? Yeah, so those 2 things. Think up some questions that you could ask them, particularly which would let them share what they believe, and asking them questions that might just probe into what they believe, because they are good ways of actually getting an understanding of how they think about the world. And if we don't actually start to understand how they think about the world, we really can't get ways to actually make the gospel relevant to them, so that then there's actually key points which they can attach to and say, that's the same thing, and they can then understand the gospel. Because otherwise you actually can be talking at something which is totally just anathema to them. I've heard someone say, you can't have sacrifice, because how could someone else pay your penalty? And that was in a different culture again. So we need to understand how they're thinking in order to be able to get people to understand what the gospel is. So we'll challenge you to make up some questions for. You can pick either a Buddhist or an atheist.
Somebody else? Where did the first life come from? Yeah.
So asking them to tell their creation story, yeah, or their, that sort of thing. That's a good one.
Yeah, how did it work?
Yeah.
How did it work? Okay, couple more.
On the point of not knowing what their beliefs are, was to ask them, do you have a faith? Do you have a belief?
Yeah.
And then allows you then to enter into the conversation under what they say. And if it's no belief, then you know which way to go. And out of that, then what reasons do you choose to believe or not believe?
Right.
In what you do.
Yeah. Believe or not believe, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. you not believe?